Hello and welcome to O3 Solutions breakout session, One Giant Leap for AWP. We're going to be talking about several case studies today, including how a regional office scaled from 1 to 50 AWP projects in a month, and as well as a number of other case studies sharing some advances in AWP and O3 technology. Before we get started today, I want to do a quick safety moment, just reminding people as you're spending a lot of time in your chairs today working from home, make sure that you put yourself in a comfortable position and a safe position. Make sure your chair is at the right height and has the right support, particularly for your back. Keyboard and mouse are in a comfortable position within arm's reach and your forearms at the correct position. Make sure your monitor is at the right height. This is one that prior to doing this safety moment, I would usually have my monitor a little bit too high. But you actually want the top of your monitor to be slightly lower than your eye level. So I'm standing here today. But whether you're standing or sitting, you want to make sure that you have your monitor at the right height so that you're not overly straining your eyes. And then make sure you have the right accessories in place using floor mats or headsets, anti-glare monitors, blue light blocking lenses, whatever it is to help prevent some of that strain during the day. And then just make sure you assess your environment, so the lighting, temperature, humidity, noise levels, and other things. Make sure that those are at the right level so that you are comfortable and safe during today's and this week's marathon session of virtual conference participation. So now that we've gotten the safety moment, I want to start by introducing myself. I'm Josh Gervin, the CEO and co-founder of O3 Solutions. I sit on the CII Technology Committee and co-chair the AWP Performance and Benchmarking Subcommittee for the AWP CBA. Previously, ran product and market strategy for materials management and RFID software in industrial construction. So 10 years in building software specifically for the industrial construction market, 12 technology patents, and originally a BSc in mechanical engineering. Overview of what we're going to talk about today. Start out with a purpose and objective of why are we here. A little bit of an overview on O3 for those of you who are new to O3, and then we're going to launch into some case studies. So we'll be talking about how we are doing scalable AWP at scale, how we're creating work packages across disciplines for both using both 3D models and non-graphically, how we've partnered to bring self-paced online AWP training, particularly during COVID, where access to the job sites is more restricted. We'll talk about implementation of a large mega project with lots of digital threads and how that can be done quickly. We'll also talk about how we've partnered with some other EP companies to introduce agile project management outside of construction. So how we're expanding AWP to add value directly to engineering, and then how we're seeing and through our owner clients a real hard value around time on tools and safety increases as a result of using advanced work packaging. We'll wrap up with some key takeaways and then open it up to questions. Keep in mind that you can add questions at any time using the questions box in the GoToWebinar control panel. So please feel free to add those questions as we go. So what? Why are we here? Why do I think this is a presentation that's worth your valuable time, particularly over the lunch slot? So why do we think you guys should be here and paying attention today? Well, a couple of things. First, we're going to talk about how scalable AWP is happening at scale. So there's been a lot of talk about how we need to scale AWP, how it needs to be brought to brownfield small cap projects. We're going to talk about how that's being done today. Some owners are implementing scalable AWP at scale, bringing it to lots of projects, managing portfolios of projects. Next is announcing through our partnership with AUTODESK how we are offering graphical work packaging. So a lot of people are familiar with O3 being a non-graphical work packaging tool, a constraint management tool, a reporting and analytics tool. While those things are all true, we're really excited to announce that now through our partnership with AUTODESK, we have the graphical work packaging component and status visualization component built into the tool as well. Then we're going to talk about AWP software implementation. One of the challenges that we've seen and one of the kind of pushbacks that we see from clients is around the idea that implementing technology can take months, sometimes even a year to get technology in place for these projects. And that's something that we really are very passionate about. It should be measured in weeks and not months. The software implementation for these projects, if you're using modern SaaS technologies that are intuitive and easy to train on, easy to implement and configure, you should be measuring those in weeks and not months. if you're thinking about it in months, that you really should take a look at either the technology that you're implementing or the process that you're using to introduce that technology. We're also really excited to talk about online self-paced training and how that supports remote-only AWP implementations. This has been particularly important during times of COVID, where there's been a reduction in the number of people that have been allowed on site. So being able to do that remotely is critical when you have those restrictions. But I think it's also really important for the industry. If we want AWP to reach the level of adoption that we know that it should, it has to be done in a scalable way. We can't reach the level of understanding in the industry if we have to do one-on-one physical in-place training. We need online tools so that we can scale that education. So we're really excited to talk about what we're doing there with a partnership with the Concord Academy. And then one of the areas that I think is really important when we talk about adoption is around engineering. So in my opinion, the adoption of AWP is most difficult within the engineering side. And I think the reason we see that is because in a lot of ways we're asking engineering to change what they do in order to benefit the project as a whole. So we know that if we get engineering to have construction-driven engineering and to have their path of engineering better support the path of construction, there are benefits downstream in construction, improved productivity, improved time on tools, but that's not necessarily benefiting engineering directly. It's benefiting the project, and it makes sense to do. But what we want is a situation where engineering is wanting to emphatically raise their hand and say, I want to do AWP because it's the right thing for my organization, not because it's the right thing for the project, but because it benefits me and my team. And so we're really excited to announce some things, what we've been doing in partnership with some EP firms to bring that value directly to engineering. And then lastly, just sharing, if you're new to AWP and you have questions from yourself or senior management around, hey, I see CII, I see some academic studies, I hear talk of 10% TIC, but where's the real hard value? Well, we've seen that, owners have documented that, we've seen it around productivity and safety, and excited to share some of that with you today. So hopefully that's some of those are interesting topics, and you guys are excited for this presentation. I want to start out by introducing O3 for the folks that are not familiar with O3 Solutions. So who is O3? We're a modern SaaS platform that leverages advanced work packaging and agile, and we're purpose-built for the industrial construction industry. So we're not a tool that was built for some other market that's trying to move into industrial construction. We're not a tool that was built for general project management and now is trying to add an AWP sticker onto it and say, hey, we do AWP too. Now, we were built from the very beginning betting completely on advanced work packaging and agile being the way that we execute projects in industrial construction moving forward. And we're also being a modern tool. It is a SaaS platform, so it's not a on-premise thick client approach to the solution. When we take a look at our overall solution suite, it is important to keep in mind that it is a platform. That platform does go across the entire life cycle of the project from concept through commissioning. And we're really going to focus in today on the blue ring, where we have OnPlan, which is our early front-end planning tool, particularly used by owners for setting up the project for AWP success. OnDesign, which is around the detailed engineering functionality for engineering and procurement, bringing AWP and Agile to those organizations. OnBuild, which is the work-phase planning for the construction management and installation execution. And then OnStart, which is around systems completion and startup and commissioning. So it is a full solution suite that goes across the entire project lifecycle and is focused around AWP and Agile. A little bit about O3 in terms of where we focus. Our client base is roughly 50-50 split between owners and EPCs, so we do work with both. Originally, we were 100% focused on the owners, but as we've grown the tool and we've been pulled into working directly with EPCs. In terms of projects that we work with, we're on some of the largest projects in the world with the tens of billions of dollars of TIC, down to some of the smallest projects with the $50,000, $100,000 TIC that are managed as a portfolio of multiple projects at an existing operating asset. So experience on the very large and small projects and pretty much everything in between. And then I mentioned this, but really excited to announce our partnership with AUTODESK and to bring comprehensive advanced work packaging. So we've embedded the Autodesk Forge viewer inside of our tool, which you can see in the screenshot here, which allows us to do the status visualizations, as well as the graphical creation or scoping of those packages, not limited to installation work packages, but other package types as well. And then also with the integration with BIM 360 Docs, allows us to automatically pull in drawings and other information, other documents when we create those packages. We selected Autodesk for a number of reasons, but a couple of those are, one, they also have a modern SaaS platform, which fits nicely with our design approach. It also supports 3D models of pretty much any type and size, so the ability to support models authored outside of their tool set, which is really important to us, as well as to be able to support very large models in a SaaS environment. And then also having that SaaS approach allows us to meet folks where they are in a crawl, walk, run approach. So the O3 tool set is pretty comprehensive, robust AWP tool across the entire life cycle. But we understand that when people are starting their AWP journey, they're not going to start necessarily with all of that, and there's a need to kind of meet people where they are for their maturity, and the scalability and the SaaS components of the Autodesk toolset match well with O3's approach there. So that, to kind of summarize that complete packaging solution, it's the graphical and non-graphical scoping, so being able to do scoping in the model or outside of that using things like engineering lists or equipment lists. The constraint management, that's O3 is synonymous with constraint management. We really pioneered bringing true constraint management into the industrial construction space. Previously, tools looked at it as a constraint identification process or a checklist. Within O3, a constraint is its own entity that can be assigned and can be given a due date and reported on with alerts and notifications and statuses and workflows. So it's a real entity that gets proactively managed within the tool. Workflows and automation for managing the packages through their entire workflow. So it's not just about creating or scoping that package, but you have to manage it through an entire workflow to really have visibility into your process. That visibility then can be shown graphically for that geospatial context of the status visualizations within the model. So you can show key project data, things like status, progress, constraints, blockers, critical path, productivity factors. That information can be displayed inside the model, which allows you to reach some interesting insights because you can see inside of that context of where inside of the construction project is that occurring. And then ultimately, for more detailed data-driven analysis, the dashboards with the ability to drill down into that. One thing we get asked a lot is, well, hey, I've got this data warehouse and this, a generic Power BI charting tool. Do I really need another dashboard? I kind of have a solution for that. And we're not trying to replace that rear-facing archival dashboarding charting solution. This is about action, taking action. You immediately be able to see and manage by exception. I've got something that's red. I can drill down into that, understand the underlying data, immediately assign an action for course correction. So this is about real-time management and leveraging the data for better, quicker, faster decision-making inside of execution, not an archival rear-facing charting application. So with that, I want to start off and launch into some case studies. Hopefully folks are familiar a little bit with what O3 does. From a case study perspective, I'm going to start talking about scaling AWP from 0 to 50 small projects and doing that in a really rapid fashion. This particular case study, a little background on that. This is an offshore portfolio. Phase one of this was across 4 assets and a lot of projects. So one thing to keep in mind is some of these projects are really small. So some of those projects are managed really as kind of CWPs within the tool. But this is a large set of projects that previously would be managed using Excel. And done in different ways across different project managers. You can get a little bit of a view of the size of some of the construction work packages and installation work packages that have been done to date, constraints closed out and identified. I think the thing to keep in mind here is that this is a lot of small projects managed in a kind of disparate way using different sets of tools across people and being able to bring that together now and use a tool purpose-built for managing that. Moving forward in this phase 2 of 2021, we'll be extending that out to the total of 8 assets in this particular offshore portfolio and extending the training and cross-training for those new projects. In terms of the scope of how much AWP was being used, CWP creation and management, IWP creation and management, constraint management, and then team collaboration. So team collaboration is the ability to have team boards inside of the tool where you can track and manage all of the actions. So one of the things that sets O3 apart is it's really an execution, action-oriented tool where all of those actions, whether it's constraints, whether it's approvals, whether it's delays, whether it's just action items, whether it's risks, issues, decisions, any of those types of actions inside the application, those are individual actions that are tracked and managed, but you can also do that in a Kanban or card view where I can use a more agile process and move them through similar to the way you may have done with sticky notes on a whiteboard in an analog environment. You can see just a little bit of testimonial of some of the excitement and benefit around using the system. When we talk about this type of implementation, the big value comes from the cross-project reporting and analysis and being able to bring all this data into one place and look at this as a portfolio and take a portfolio approach, whereas before this may have been managed as a bunch of really small projects. Now you can bring it together and you can understand and have a standard kind of consistent way of approaching that and managing those. We look at some of the benefits, really the standardization of the approach across hundreds of small projects. That's the real driver here, is to get that consistent definition of things like progress across different contractors, a status across different projects, and having real-time visibility into that allows you to optimize limited offshore resources. Those of you who are familiar with offshore projects understand that the constraints around things like access to the workface or laydown yard space or just beds for resources are really constrained, and that's in the best of times. You add COVID on top of that and you see additional constraints around that. So being able to optimize that across a portfolio of projects is extremely valuable. And without having that consistent kind of consolidated view of that, that's a real challenge. Some of the lessons learned through this, when we started this implementation or started this process pre-COVID, the plan was to send people to site and do kind of standard, classroom type training around advanced work packaging. Had to really pivot around that and bring in a self-paced online option. We partnered with Concord Academy to be able to bring that in, but that was something that a pivot or change that we had to make based off of some of the restrictions of going to critical personnel only on site. And then we also learned that we can manage some small projects as CWPs rather than individual projects to reduce some of the overhead. While there's O3 does everything it can to limit the overhead burden associated with managing a project, it is non-zero. And so if you can take some of the CWPs and manage those projects as CWPs, you can reduce some of that and make things even easier. Next steps for this, roll out across the entire business unit, and then incorporation of a mobile technology for access to the installation work packages in the field. So there's a process now of having to kind of paper print out and deliver those, and there's helicopters involved in that process. So it's a expensive process to kind of deliver that analog data. So by leveraging mobile, we think there's a real benefit there as well. Next case study I want to talk about is creating work packages across disciplines with and without a 3D model. So this is a background of this. Operating refinery is an operating asset, active projects of 13. You can get a sense of the number of construction work packages and installation work packages. This is an asset that's been in place using AWP much longer. It's been several years in using advanced work packaging and the O3 solution to manage that. So they've got a little bit more experience under their belt. And have done a little bit more development of advanced work packaging entities through that process. In terms of the scope, graphical and non-graphical package development, so CWP and IDP development using both 3D model components and engineering and material lists for development of that. So previously was focused on the non-graphical. Now through the introduction of the complete solution in O3, both graphical and non-graphical, they can do that in that one solution. RFI tracking, so moved from spreadsheets to using O3 for managing those RFIs, reduced the resolution time required there. Really excited about what's going on with scaffolding, so scaffolding work packages and managing scaffolding, so the constraints and approvals around that process, tying scaffolding to installation work packages. You can manage scaffolding as a constraint on a package, but if you use that scaffold as its own work package, now you can do, it's more convenient to do this multi-discipline management of scaffolding where I can use that same scaffolding for steel and then use it for pipe as well, and I can avoid some of the scaffolding teardown and and replacement that occurs on projects that can be inefficient. And then on the material side, so the constraint management is a big piece of this, specifically on the material side, automating some of that creation and clearing of constraints through material analysis. So pulling in that material inventory data and doing an automated analysis to create and clear constraints. You can see in the screenshot here or video here, the creating of a work package with a 3D model. So as everyone knows, this is the scoping process. I can go in, I can grab multiple components. I can add those to a new or existing installation work package. Automatically, we're pulling in information based on that. So based on the tags that are selected, we're grabbing drawings, we're creating execution tasks, we're creating estimated efforts, hours, things like that, based off of rates of placement. In addition to that, O3 has, for the longest time, supported creating work packages without a 3D model. So this works well in environments where you don't have a properly attributed engineering model to support the virtual construction model automation, or no model at all, or you're talking about disciplines that aren't modeled to that level of detail. The real benefit here is now that with both of these solutions in one place, I don't have to have one tool for creating some packages and then go to Excel for other packages and Word for other packages. I can do that all in one place. Of course, with the model and the embedded Forge viewer inside of the O3 solution set, you can also do status visualization. So there's a status visualization engine inside of O3 that supports doing it by progress of the packages, constraints against components, material status as a constraint. All of those, the productivity, the progress, earned value. So all the things that you would expect to see in a status visualization, you can select and view that data, and then you get this kind of geospatial context of that information, which can be really powerful for decision making, quickly. Some of the benefits here. So we've seen 18% increase in field productivity of AWP projects over non-AWP projects. So this is the holy grail. This is why people are driving AWP. It's seeing that increase in construction productivity. So this is numbers documented by the client, not by us, but really excited to see that. And that's based off of a statistically significant number of data observations across lots of projects. So tens of thousands of observations across tens of AWP projects and tens of non-AWP projects. It gives you meaningful results. And then you have some software benefits around enhanced visibility, collaboration, and accountability. Collaboration, particularly valuable during COVID times, people working from home. You can now do that digitally, that digital collaboration component. I think a lot of people are starting to understand the real value of digital collaboration now as a result of COVID. Some lessons learned through this process. So change management at operating facilities is definitely more challenging than a mega project, just due to the institutional inertia. So you've got people that have been there for 30 years doing their job the same way for 30 years. And as a result of that, to kind of move people off of that really well-worn path, there's more change management involved than with a mega project where you kind of bring people together and that you have a new team and you kind of say, here's how we're going to execute. On the other hand, one of the nice things about operating facilities from a change management perspective is you have a constant flow of projects coming in. So you've constantly got new project starts. And so unlike a mega project where you kind of have to set what you're going to do from an AWP perspective and then execute that over the life of the project, with a continuous funnel of small projects, you can bite off that change management into smaller pieces. So you can say, this project I'm going to do IWPs, next project I'm going to introduce CWPs, next project I'm going to introduce EWPs, whatever it is, you can break that down into a smaller bite-sized changes over projects. We also learned engineering tends to be the least motivated to change. Again, I talked about this briefly, but I think this has to do with the fact that we're asking engineering to change the way they do their work in order to benefit the project as a whole. But a lot of that benefit is seen downstream from them. And so we've put a lot of thought into how do we address engineering directly. Next steps here, graphical creation, visualization of additional packages, mobile access to IWPs in the field. So that's obviously a big push for us. And then expansion of engineering work package utilization. So getting more engineering involved into this AWP implementation. So next case study I want to talk about is about launching self-paced AWP training and certification during COVID. So mentioned this briefly, But we had to pivot on some projects where we were planning on doing the normal kind of on-site, in-person classroom type training for AWP and personal coaching that we have brought through our partners on a number of implementations. It's an effective method, but COVID happened and said, hey, well, we can't really do that, so we need to kind of pivot and figure out a better solution. And so this, what we ended up going with is online self-paced training, just a little bit of the scope around that workplace planning certification. So there's a number of courses in place here, a series of courses executed by around 40 people on the project. And you can see some of the objectives and materials areas that are covered in the fundamentals, as well as some of the templates and certification, workplace planning methodology, and some of the feedback around this course and how it has benefited at least this construction planner. In terms of the numbers, that solution included 40 workers completing the full course, 152 completed at least a single course, average time 2 to 3 days. And then we tracked all that information using O3. So O3 has on-course a solution which is meant to help you manage the change management process for the adoption of AWP, as well as the adoption of O3 as a technology. So we tracked all of that training and completion towards that certifications using the O3 tool set. Our partner here for delivering the online self-paced training was Concord Academy, and you can see a screenshot there of some of their solution. Feedback on that was really positive, particularly around the kind of intuitive nature of use of the tool. Very easy to get in place. It's very convenient to be able to do this on your own, self-paced. This is particularly true inside of an offshore environment with lots of small cap projects because in that environment you're constantly fighting fires. Hopefully not literal fires, but you're jumping from project to project, and you're dealing with lots of issues. You're managing not just one project, but lots of projects. And so the idea of being able to kind of sit down at a defined time and take a course, that's a real challenge. But if it's self-paced, now I can squeeze it in the cracks whenever I find time. So it makes it a little bit easier for the guys out there who do have a day job in addition to having to introduce this new process and technology. Some of the benefits we saw here: reduced safety concerns, so limited to critical personnel only. We didn't have to introduce a lot of risk there by bringing more people. Overwhelmingly positive reception of the courses, so successful training of the 40 folks plus 2 AWP champions, so 2 people that got a little more training to be able to help drive this and drive a train the trainer program. Some lessons learned through this process. So additional training for detailed workplace planning work, that's needed. So there's more detail there, and that's in the works. That's feedback that's been given back to Concord, and they are working on additional detail there. And then additional integration between Concord and O3 required to automate some of that. So there was a little bit of a manual manipulation to get from the Concord system to the O3 solution for that training tracking. We're in the process of making that a real-time integration so that we remove that kind of manual component to that. And then also a lesson learned there, I mentioned this, but just being able to do self-paced when you're in an environment, small brownfield environment, where you're jumping from project to project, that's really, really valuable, where people can do it on their own. They've got complicated schedules, so being able to find that on their time on their own is extremely valuable. Next steps here: train the trainer program, leveraging O3 training and certifications for all training and certifications. So we've got clients that track absolutely all their training, the orientation, safety training, all those types of trainings, not just their AWP or workplace planning or O3 training, but if you already got the training solution in place, you might as well leverage that for tracking across lots of different trainings. And some people often ask, well, hey, doesn't each of these organizations have their own internal learning management system, their own fill-in-the-blank university? And the answer is yes, most do. But then when you get to projects where you have JVs and lots of contractors and different stakeholders and owners and EPCs, we find people are tracking this in spreadsheets. So O3 as a collaborative SaaS platform that allows access for all of those stakeholders to come together can replace those spreadsheets, and you can manage that training inside of a tool where access is provided to all of those different participants. And then additional trainings are needed as the program expands to the additional assets in 2021. So next case study we're going to talk about is rolling out AWP on a mega project, $10 billion project with 38 integration points, so 38 digital threads in 5 weeks. My client success team has made me promise that I point out that the Kickoff to go live for the project was 5 weeks, but finishing all of the integrations actually took an additional 6 weeks. So 11 weeks total for complete implementation, but project kickoff to go live, where they begin using the tool and getting value, was 5 weeks. Little background on that project: $10 billion project, an exporting facility, 3 trains with 5.2 million ton capacity. There's a pipeline component in addition to that, so it's a large LNG project. In terms of the scope of what they're doing, non-graphical package development, so CWP and IDP development using components in a non-graphical fashion. Constraint management, so this was the big component that really drove the use of O3 on this particular project, but being able to collaboratively manage those constraints across all the package types and all the stakeholders. So this particular organization has a fairly complex AWP master index, and really excited about the idea that O3's constraint management is not limited just to installation with packages. It applies across all package types. RFI tracking, again, being used here, and then some automated constraint analysis around materials is part of this solution as well. And then you can see some of the feedback here. One of the ones I'll point out is the one in the middle, where this particular project manager is comparing the use of O3 team boards to that of Trello. If you're familiar with Trello, that's a Kanban solution for managing actions in an agile format. The O3 is being used to drive that on the project today. So again, lots of integrations across multiple systems. So inside of O3, you can define those systems, define the expected data deliverables from those systems, track and manage whether or not those are being received in a complete and timely fashion, which makes that management, that functionality around the managing of that data adds a lot of value, whether it's real-time RESTful API integrations or a flat file import-export process. Having that data management capability within the tool to understand the expectations of the data and then report and alert on whether or not those are being achieved is really valuable for the folks responsible for managing the data inside the system. Some of the benefits: reduced implementation time frame and delivered ahead of schedule. So kickoff to go live was 5 weeks, originally was 6 weeks, so we're able to kind of reduce that schedule. Supported a smooth, remote-only implementation during COVID, so nobody from O3 or one of our partners spent any time on site, being able to do this all remote. That's extremely important as we try to scale advanced work packaging within the industry. We can't have a huge on-premise cost associated with that. We just don't have enough SMEs in the world. It's not scalable if you're on a kind of one-to-one delivery model. And then managing the implementation of other tools. So O3 is actually being used to manage the implementation of some other tools on this job. So not O3 tools, but some other software implementations. The client was so pleased with how our client success team approaches the management of the O3 implementation using the O3 tool in an agile fashion that they've extended that to manage some other tools as well. And then increased visibility and collaboration. That's a big piece of any O3 implementation. One of the major mantras of Agile, for those that are familiar, is make all work visible. And that's something that O3 does. All those actions, rather than being buried away in disparate Excel spreadsheets and emails and text messages, now all that work is visible and you understand who's responsible for what by when, and everyone can see that and collaborate around that same data. Some of the lessons learned here: data management planning is pretty challenging when some other software implementations are behind schedule. And switching to Agile to be able to adjust a little bit more to that and be more flexible was really beneficial there. And so just managing in an Agile fashion, that's critical to supporting these condensed schedules and then some variables that are outside of our control. So we use that Agile approach now with all of our implementations, and we do all of that managed within our own tool. So we like to say that we eat our own barbecue. We use our own tool to manage our process. Next steps here: real-time API integrations. So we use RESTful APIs for bidirectional real-time integrations, so as needed, implementing scaffold work packaging and scaffolding, and then transitioning from RFI tracking to full RFI management. So when O3 looks at different value that it provides through functionality, we put things into 2 buckets, either tracking or managing. Tracking is where we consume data from another system that's used for execution, and then we provide some visibility, reporting, capabilities around that. And then management is where O3 is actually the execution tool where you're taking that action. So right now they're using another application for RFI and O3 is doing the tracking. We're moving that over to actual full management and execution of RFIs inside of O3. So next case study I want to talk about is introducing agile project management for teams outside of construction. And this is really focused on adding value directly to engineering. For those of you that are familiar with agile project management, I'm using an IT example here of release planning, sprint execution, and then visibility and continuous improvement. That's often called retrospectives, where it's a plus delta continuous improvement on each of those sprints. Within the software world, those sprints typically are kind of 2-week sprints. That's what O3 does. We do agile software development, and we do a production release every 2 weeks. So that's 26 production releases per year. So we're constantly updating and improving our solution based off of feedback from the field. But that agile process allows you to have better planning because you have better information each time you're planning, rather than starting at the beginning and trying to plan based off of just the information you have at the beginning. If you use agile, you're constantly iteratively planning, you have better information. Well, AWP has a lot of similar concepts to that. If you look at how we think about construction work packages, that's kind of similar to a release, and installation work packages are kind of similar to a sprint. Then you execute that, and then we have a plus delta or retrospective process to how do we improve on our installation work package execution. So we see a lot of similarities between agile and advanced work packaging. Obviously, there are some differences when you're building a physical thing in the meat space. That's different than software development where you can easily refactor things and make adjustments. So there are some nuances, obviously, but there are a lot of similarities to way these things, the benefits associated with these two methodologies. Some of the benefits of agile: efficiency, predictability, cost savings, quality, adaptability. So you see a lot of overlap in terms of the challenges and the problems that we're trying to solve with agile. So when we started thinking about advanced work packaging and the challenges to adoption, as I mentioned, we focused in on engineering because engineering is critical to the process. But when you think about the adoption, engineering, rarely do you see folks in engineering enthusiastically raising their hand and saying, I want AWP. I don't care if you're going to do workplace planning. I don't care if construction is going to use any of this. I'm doing AWP because it's going to benefit me in engineering. That's not something that we hear a lot about. Often we hear engineering is kind of begrudgingly pulled into doing AWP because it benefits the project or it benefits construction and it's the right decision overall. It's being pushed by the project management team or the owners driving that. And what we want is a situation where engineering says, this is awesome. This is what I want. This is how I do business. I don't care if you're going to benefit downstream, but this is so valuable to me, I'm going to do this. And so what we did is we sat down with a number of EP firms, large EP firms, and we talked about this challenge. We talked about why are you not adopting AWP as enthusiastically as we'd like to see. And the first thing we did is we held some discovery workshops where we collected those challenges around the existing approach. And then we developed a desired future state process flow and iterated on that with them. And then developed some functional mock-ups and iterated on those. And then ultimately developed the solution, which we're excited to talk about here today. So this case study is really about that partnership with multiple EP firms to develop that. And I think it is important to note that there were multiple folks involved in that, not just a single EP firm. So what does this bring? This brings a couple of new package types. So a design work package type, a vendor work package. We've adjusted the way that we think about vendor work packages. And so one of the things that we identified here was that if you think about the value that workplace planning has, it's really about taking that construction work package and breaking it down into this smaller, more manageable, well-defined scope of work of an installation work package that's designed for one specific team to execute in a specific well-defined time frame, 1 or 2 weeks. So it's a crew shift worth of work that's really well-defined. If you imagine going out into a job site, you would lose a lot of the value of AWP if you turn to a foreman and you just hand them a CWP and you say, go do it, and you give each foreman a CWP. The whole point is you want to break that CWP down into a smaller piece. Here's an IWP of just what you need to know, everything you need to know, and nothing else. So you can focus and you can spend time with your craft and you can execute. Right? Well, in engineering, we've got the engineering work package that's essentially at the same level as a CWP, but we don't have that IWP equivalent below that breaks it down and says, here, team lead, this is what you need, everything you need, and only what you need. And so that's what we've done here is we've broken that down into design work packages and vendor work packages for managing in a more discrete fashion the design process and the vendor data management process. We've continued to use our robust constraint management functionality. We've added through our integration with Autodesk the ability to do drawing annotation. So a lot of the back and forth with vendors is captured inside of drawings. And you want those to be constraints. But one of the things we learned through our workshop is we don't want to have to go to one system to be able to kind of annotate on a drawing and then another system to say, well, this is a constraint. If we could do that in one place and capture that information in one place, there's value associated with that. And then because of the way the modern SaaS application is set up, as well as our commercial model being unlimited users, it drives vendor collaboration. So vendors can access the tool. You can go back and forth. You're working off of that same sheet of music because you can assign, an approval or a review process back and forth between you and the vendor. And then lastly, we've introduced this idea of agile sprints. So we think there's value in just taking the AWP and then breaking it down to that next level of design and vendor work packages and managing that information in a more discrete fashion. But then for those organizations that want to go a step further, they can also take all those actions from all those different packages and build sprints and then manage those sprints and have velocities associated with that. They can use point or hours methods for those of you familiar with Agile. So there's a ability to take that and then manage it in Agile fashion, which we think is really exciting. And we see people actually doing today, even exogenous to anything that O3 is doing. So the use of Agile in engineering is really exciting. So some of the benefits, built-in partnership with real end users. So at O3, we think we're pretty clever, right? We like to build software. But at the end of the day, what we're really good at is listening. We're really good at sitting down with people, understanding their challenges, mapping out what that should look like in terms of software, and then developing that. And we leveraged input from multiple engineering groups to do this, including owner engineers. So we understand there's some distinction between EP firms and owner engineering, so we made sure that we included both of those. Some of the lessons learned, we were really excited to validate that organizations are already adopting agile methodologies within engineering. So we had that hypothesis, but we were able to validate that, which was really exciting. So some folks are already doing that, and so it's an easy move to get them to kind of think about it in this AWP plus agile capacity. We learned some things around solution offerings needing to be configurable. So we found that some of the client-specific workflows, there are definitely nuances. We don't want to say, as a software development firm, we want our software to be opinionated, right? We believe that there's a right way to do things, but we don't want to be so opinionated in our software that it can't fit or be adjusted to fit to some client-specific workflows or nuances. And then just a note, we did develop a white paper around Agile in construction. You can check it out at our virtual booth and download that if you want to see some of the things that we're talking about around Agile inside of construction. Next steps here, rolling out with the beta projects, and then expand. Next for this, we want to go beyond engineering into procurement. So we're just going to keep marching down the line. Our view is that every single project participant should have AWP functionality and an agile functionality that's designed specifically to benefit their organization, not just the project as a whole. So next step for us is to tackle procurement. I'm excited to continue working with the folks that we've already been working with. So in this next case study, I want to talk about realizing real hard benefits around advanced work packaging. I'm going to focus in on productivity in the field and safety. So this is around an enterprise field productivity program. This is with an owner. Deployed this at multiple operating facilities as well as multiple mega projects with the intent to go global with this implementation. So in the process of that rollout across a global portfolio. The number of observations completed are in the over hundreds of thousands at this point, but there's lots of information being collected. So this is, if not the most, if this isn't the largest field productivity data set available today, it soon will be, as this is continually growing at a rapid rate. So very excited to be able to leverage that to make some statistically significant and relevant insights from that data set. In terms of the scope, it's using a native iPad app for the mobile data collection. So, and then that information is fed back up in real time to the web app for cross-project reporting, where you can look and slice and dice across contractors, areas, disciplines, et cetera, and then ultimately rolled up to the enterprise level. So you can look at this from an overall productivity of an enterprise or a business unit, individual facility, individual project. So you can kind of move up and down. And being a multi-project modern SaaS application, O3 is structured to allow that data comparison across multiple projects. Some of the ways that we pull that data back, and then you can look at that in real-time cross-project dashboards. I will make the note that it is real-time, but the iPad app also supports a offline mode. That was a lessons learned that we had to add offline mode for some facilities where network is spotty. So if you're in offline mode, you don't have network, you can still capture data, and then when you get back to the network, that information syncs back. So it's real-time. There can be a delay if it's an offline mode situation. But you have real-time cross-project data reporting. And then that information can also be done inside of a status visualization. So we can take that same data and display that in that geospatial context of the model, which is exciting. So looking at productivity within the context of the physical construction site. So some of the benefits here: apples to apples comparison across the projects, which allows that meaningful, cross-project comparison that drives that continuous improvement. If we don't collect the data in a standard way, we don't measure it in a standard way, and we don't reach conclusions in a standard way, it's really hard to kind of compare across projects and drive improvement, leveraging that information. Using that app and removing the kind of paper process for data collection helps drive that standardization, right? It puts up some bumpers to kind of keep people going down a defined path. Now, obviously, people can still have human error with an iPad, but it does put up some bumpers and kind of help drive people towards the correct and standard way to collect that data. Some of the lessons learned through this process is that training on this process is really important to getting standardized data. The tool actually helped us identify where we had some training issues. So we saw some information that was sort of out of whack. This doesn't make sense. We could drill down and understand it was a training issue and then course correct that with some additional training. One thing that we learned also on the safety side when collecting this, being able to adapt that quickly to safety criteria for COVID-19 was critical. So while you want to be collecting standard data so that you can be consistent, you also need to be able to, the ability to configure and adapt to a situation like COVID-19, where we added a list of safety questions pertaining to things like, are you social distancing? Are people 6 feet apart? Are people wearing masks? Those types of questions. And it was important to be able to kind of add that to our data collection. So O3, both on the time on tool side and the safety side, comes with a standard set of criteria, and default set of criteria, but you can adjust those to whatever your criteria are for your organization. And then you can adjust them to adapt to things like a COVID situation as needed. And then we also learned that there are some nuances between the way that you look at productivity and safety within maintenance, small cap, mega projects, and turnaround. So there's some differences in those types of projects. And so we had to actually build some additional functionality to address that. And so that was a lessons learned through that process, that while we kind of went in naively thinking, oh, the process should be standard in all of these different areas, it turns out there are some nuances that the software needed to adjust for. Next steps, global rollout, extending that productivity status visualization. So maybe adding a 4D component so you can kind of see the progress, the movement of that productivity or safety over time. And then, full rollout of mobile applications for safety observations. So some of those safety observations have been done using the web app, just to, need to get more hardware out into the field. So in conclusion, I want to summarize with a couple of key takeaways and then jump over into a questions section. So key takeaways, scaled A2P is happening right now at scale. So if you're waiting for scaled A2P to be a thing, no need to wait any longer. This is happening now and it's happening at scale. Want everyone to walk away knowing that O3 offers, graphical workface planning, work scoping now. I think we've been known for years as a non-graphical work package management tool, as a constraint management tool, reporting analytics tool. Want everyone to walk away knowing that now with our partnership with AUTODESK and the embedded Forge viewer, we have the graphical component both for scoping and status visualization. Also want people to walk away knowing that your complex mega project A2P software implementation doesn't need to take 9 months or a year. You should be measuring these things in weeks. If the software doesn't support it or their process doesn't support it, you should challenge that, because you should be able to implement this type of software in weeks, not months, even when it involves integrations, even when it involves training, even when it involves configuration. If you follow an agile process and you use good tools to manage that implementation, you can do that in a matter of weeks. Online self-paced A2P training is here, and it's a great option, particularly during COVID when you have restricted access. But I think this is the future. Been pushing for this for a long time. O3 considered getting into this business directly because I think it's really important for this to grow and to scale the industry. We've partnered now and are bringing this through Concord Academy. Really excited to have this offering. We see now other offerings are becoming available. I think this is critical for the future of the industry. For us to scale, it can't be a one-to-one process. We have to remove that human manual component and be able to drive this in a more scalable fashion. Traditional AWP, not focused on adding value directly to engineering. Probably going to get a few emails about my kind of taking my soapbox here, but I think this is important that we look at AWP, we look at the value that we're driving to engineering, and we be real about ourselves about the fact that we're asking engineering to change the way they do business in order to support the project. Now, there are benefits to engineering. I'm not saying there aren't, but the vast majority of the benefits that we talk about are downstream from that. So I think we should look at it in terms of how do we benefit engineering so that they enthusiastically raise their hands and saying, I'm doing AWP regardless of whether construction wants it or not. This is the right thing for me. And I don't think we're seeing a lot of that today, but we're excited and think we're going to be seeing more of that soon. And then lastly, if you are waiting for the benefits to be in and to know that AWP is valuable, wait no longer. We see this now in terms of safety and productivity in the field. That information is in, it's documented. And so please, happy to put you in touch with the folks that have been collecting this, our clients are collecting this information, if you want to understand more about what they've seen in the field. So if you would like to learn more about O3 Solutions, you can go to our website, www.o3.solutions. You can get our case studies. We do lots of webinars, 1 or 2 a month. There's videos on all our solutions. Feel free to go and grab that, as well as go to our virtual booth where you can capture some additional information. You can also download our slides and the white paper that I mentioned. Those are available in our booth as well. And with that, I would like to turn it over to questions. So I'm going to pull it over to the chat panel. If you have any questions, please throw them into the chat panel. All right. Excuse me while I try to. So in your opinion, why did your mega project client stick to Trello for constraint management and not use O3 constraint management module? Okay, so I want to clarify that point. They did not. They are using O3's constraint management functionality. What they were using Trello for previously was for managing action items, and they ditched that in exchange for using O3's team board functionality. So O3's team board functionality completely replaces Trello. It goes beyond that, so there's additional functionality. But if you want to think about it's a complete Trello killer in terms of the functionality. There's more value because there's alerts and notifications and reporting and all that associated that O3 also brings to the table. But to clarify, they did not stick with the Trello. They did opt to use O3's tool set for that. And they used O3 for constraint management as well. So got another question here around why is change management more difficult at operating assets than mega projects when they're more complicated implementations of process and technology? Yeah, that's a great question. In our experience, it comes down to this institutional inertia issue where you have folks that have been doing the same process, using the same tools for 30 years, and it's working for them. Why would I change at an operating asset, right, where you have a continuous funnel of small cap projects, versus where you get together for a mega project, you get together, you have a new team, you have a new tech stack, you define a process, and then you stick to that process for the 5 to 8 years. So once you define that process at a mega project, I think change is more difficult. But if that process hasn't been defined yet and you're in early, it's easier to kind of change because you don't have this way it's been done by the same people in the same way for decades. Question about why we selected AUTODESK as our 3D model viewer technology. Yeah, so we selected AUTODESK for a number of reasons. One, the ease at which we could embed the Forge viewer inside of our tool. And the developer tools, the information, the support available from a development perspective, extremely powerful. They're in terms of their kind of culture and approach, it's a modern application, has a consistent modern UI. It's not a thick client kind of 1990s style approach. So we really liked working with someone that kind of shared a design philosophy around modern, intuitive, quality user experience software. And then just from a technical perspective, because Autodesk works with all of the engineering models, regardless of where they're authored, that's really important to us. We don't want to be kind of pigeonholed into one tech stack. We want to be able to work with all the different options. So question around the collaboration, what makes O3 a modern collaborative solution? So from a collaboration perspective, I think one thing is that our commercial model is unlimited users, and that includes all the project stakeholders. So whether that's the owner, EPC, contractors, vendors, we don't care. It's about delivering AWP and value to the project as a whole. And if you're going to do that, you want to get as many people involved in process as possible. And in order to support that, we've had to build a lot of robust and unique functionality into our roles and permissions. So one example of that is we have the ability to import your contracting quilt into the tool, and then all of the different packages and entities within the application are associated with those contracts, so that contractor A can't see contractor B's data. So we had to solve the access issue in order to be able to bring all those different stakeholders together, all those project participants together to collaborate. So we've invested a lot around that functionality. So question around whether we use the COA scalability model for AWP when deploying AWP on small cap projects. So we did not directly use the COA scalability model. We actually started before that was released, so it wasn't an option to use the scalability model. So we didn't go down and use the tight criteria of kind of assessing. We didn't use those same criteria that COA uses as I forget now, repeatable and known and unknown and unique. I'm not getting it right, but there's a matrix of kind of whether or not it's a project that you do a lot and whether or not it's a project you understand and familiar with. We did not use that process for evaluating which projects to select for AWP. We did have a process where we went through the portfolio and selected which projects to incorporate. And it used some of those similar kind of concepts when we were analyzing which ones to start with, the complexity and familiarity questions. But really what ended up being the main driver was selecting the projects, at least from the starting point, the projects where the project management team was really supportive and open to that change. So that, change management challenge, if you can have that top-down support from the project management team, that's really crucial to, successful implementation of new process or technology. So while we did an analysis, we didn't stick strictly to that COA approach, but there were some similar concepts in our approach. Question around the biggest differences between AWP implementation on small cap and mega projects. Yeah, so I think the biggest difference there. We talked about the change management challenge. So it's change management of getting the folks at small cap projects to adjust is a big difference. But outside of that, I think from the AWP implementation, one of the things that we've seen on the smaller cap projects is when you think. So I'll take installation work packages. There are some nuances to small cap work where you want to follow the best practice, but you don't want to do it to the detriment of the project. And what I mean by that is that IWPs are, they're single discipline typically, and they're a certain size as a best practice, 1,000 hours, whatever. You have these kind of best practices around the size and scope of the package. When you get into brownfield projects, you want that package to match your team, and so that you could have a multidiscipline team. It may make sense that you have a multidiscipline team for a certain run. It may make sense that you have a larger or smaller work package, maybe a smaller package for a tie-ins or a larger package for a straight run of pipe, because there is some overhead associated with packaging that work. And so I think the biggest thing there is that in a mega project, there's a lot of benefit from kind of this is a very disciplined approach where I package it up and I follow this same consistent approach. In the small cap world, there's some benefit to leveraging a little bit of common sense, not necessarily being as rigid on some of that, those definitions, but being a little bit flexible to adjust for the fact that work is executed in a slightly different way. So I think that's probably the biggest changes that we've seen between those. And then probably time for one more. So, you mentioned the implementation of Agile in construction. Where are you seeing this? So, yeah, so we actually found inside of some engineering departments, we had the hypothesis that engineering work for an industrial construction project is not that different than engineering work for software development. Obviously, there are differences, but it is white collar office engineering work, and we had the hypothesis that we would find people who are already using Agile. In fact, we did. We've seen that inside of a number of engineering departments, both with EPCs and with some owners, just using kind of off-the-shelf tools, things like Jira, to try to manage that. We think having a tool that's purpose-built for industrial construction and ties into the AWP approach that can better be leveraged downstream is going to be more beneficial, and that's why we've gone down the path of this. But we've also actually, we're involved in the Agile community at large, and we've actually seen some development of some training for Agile in construction and people looking at Scrum in construction. We're getting involved in some of that as well. So we do see a movement of introduction of Agile in general outside of anything O3 is doing, and we're excited to participate in that in the larger Agile community. And I think we are right at the time. So with that, I will thank everyone for attending today. Thank you very much for your time. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out or please visit our booth or our website. So thank you very much and have a great day.